The incredible growing gums of Barnaby Buzzle. Barnaby Buzzle lived in a house that was as gray as a wet Sunday. His only companion was Aunt Spiker-Snap, a woman who looked as though she had been carved out of a very sour crabapple. She hated joy, she hated singing, but most of all, she hated sweets. Sugar turns the brain to mush, she would bark, waving a bony finger at Barnaby while he scrubbed the cold stone floors. One Tuesday, while dusting the cobwebs in the drafty attic, Barnaby found something hidden behind a stack of moth-eaten blankets. It was a small, neon purple tin that seemed to hum with a secret energy. The label, written in swirling gold letters, read, "Fizz Whizzlers, the gum that grows with you." Barnaby's heart did a little somersault. He didn't wait a single second. He popped 3 pieces of the shimmering gum into his mouth. Pop, crackle, zing! The gum didn't just taste like strawberries. It tasted like a summer holiday and a firework display all at once. Suddenly, Barnaby felt a strange, fizzy sensation in his knees. His toes began to tingle like they were being tickled by invisible feathers. His socks, which were already a bit small, felt remarkably tight. Before he could say scrumptious, Barnaby shot upward like a weed in a rainstorm. His head bumped against the heavy oak rafters, and his arms grew as long and bendy as garden hoses. He wasn't just tall, he was colossal. He looked down at his feet, which were now miles away at the bottom of his incredibly long, spindly legs. Downstairs, Aunt Spiker-Snap heard the rafters groaning. She marched to the attic door and flung it open. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. "What is this wretched nonsense?" she shrieked, her face turning a violent shade of purple. "You've grown far too much for this house, you untidy boy. You're taking up all the air and stretching the wallpaper. I won't have it." She disappeared for a moment and returned with a pair of rusty, jagged head shears. Clack, clack, clack went the blades. "Hold still, Barnaby," she cackled, a wicked glint in her eye. "I'll just take a few feet off the top and a yard off the bottom. You'll be back to a manageable, miserable size in no time." Barnaby trembled from his head all the way down to his distant toes. He didn't want to be pruned like a rosebush. He chewed the Fizz Whizzlers faster and faster, the flavor exploding in his mouth. He took a deep, desperate breath, filled his now giant lungs with air, and blew with every bit of strength he had. A magnificent pink bubble emerged. It grew and grew, shimmering with all the colors of a secret rainbow. It was bigger than a basketball, bigger than a beanbag, bigger than Aunt Spiker-Snap's entire wardrobe. It was a glowing, sticky sphere of neon sweetness that smelled of pure magic. Just as the shears snapped shut on the very air where his ankles had been, the bubble lifted Barnaby off the floor. "Come back here, you sugary hooligan," Aunt Spiker-Snap screamed. But it was too late. Barnaby floated right through the open attic skylight, his long, wobbly legs trailing behind him like the ribbons on a very tall kite. Higher and higher he went, past the chimneys and the confused crows, leaving the gray house far behind. He drifted until he reached a land where the clouds were made of fluffy marshmallow and the rain was sweet lemon soda. Barnaby Buzzle smiled, drifting through the candy-colored sky, the tallest and happiest boy in the whole wide world. The Emerald Silence. In the heart of the city, the world was a jagged chorus of sirens and shouting. Anna lived within the clockwork, her days measured by the frantic hum of the subway and the flickering glow of screens. She felt like a glass vase filled with too much static, waiting for a crack to appear. In her pocket, she felt the familiar crinkle of the only thing that made sense anymore: her grandfather Lachlan's old, hand-drawn map of the North. The map didn't lead to a treasure chest or a forgotten city. It led to a place Lachlan called the Great Breath. Leaving the concrete behind, Anna traveled until the buildings dissolved into rolling hills and the gray sky turned a deep, bruised purple. At the edge of the green highlands, She stepped off the bus and into a world where the only schedule was the movement of the mist. The air in the green highlands didn't just flow, it lived. It was heavy with the scent of damp moss and ancient stone, pressing against Anna's skin like a cool, welcoming hand. As she began her climb, the silence of the hills felt different from the silence of her apartment. This wasn't an absence of noise, it was a presence of something much deeper. She stopped by a rushing burn to check the map. Lachlan's handwriting was spindly but sure. "Look for the stone heart where the wind sleeps," he had written in the margin. Anna traced the ink with her thumb, imagining his weathered hands holding this same paper years ago. She felt a thread of connection stretching across time, pulling her further into the emerald wild. As the sun began to dip behind the peaks, painting the ridges in gold, Anna saw it. Tucked into the fold of two great hills was a small stone bothy. It was barely visible, its roof covered in a thick carpet of emerald turf that matched the landscape perfectly. It looked as though the mountain had simply grown a small room for a weary traveler to rest in. The door of the bothy creaked open on leather hinges. Inside, the air smelled of dry peat and old wood. There was a simple wooden bunk, a small hearth, and a single window that looked out over the glen. Anna dropped her heavy pack, and for the first time in years, the static in her head began to fade. That night, Anna built a small fire in the hearth. The orange flames licked at the stones, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She didn't reach for her phone or look for a distraction. She simply sat, watching the embers pulse like a slow heartbeat. The highlands were teaching her the first lesson of the wild, how to be still. When morning came, the world was wrapped in a vibrant, glowing green. This was the emerald silence Lachlan had promised. Anna walked out into the dew-soaked grass, the mist clinging to her sweater. The valley was so quiet she could hear the beat of a raven's wings high above and the soft sigh of the earth as it woke. Suddenly, a movement caught her eye. Across the narrow glen, a great stag emerged from the mist. His antlers were like a crown of dry branches. He stopped and looked directly at Anna. Neither moved. In that shared moment of stillness, Anna realized that the peace she had been searching for wasn't something to find, but something to enter. Anna stayed in the bothy for 3 more days, long after her food began to run low. When she finally shouldered her pack to leave, she didn't feel like a glass vase anymore. She felt like the hills, steady, deep, and full of a quiet strength. She tucked the map away, knowing she wouldn't need it to find her way back to the silence ever again. The Cyclone and the Land of the East. In the middle of the great flat prairies of Kansas lived a young girl named Dorothy. She spent her days playing with her best friend, a small, playful dog named Toto. Life on the farm was quiet and gray, but Dorothy didn't mind as long as Toto was by her side to keep her company. One afternoon, the wind began to howl. Uncle Henry looked at the sky and saw the clouds turning a strange, deep shade of green. "A cyclone is coming, Em," he shouted. Aunt Em grabbed her coat and ran toward the storm cellar, urging Dorothy to follow her quickly into the safety of the ground. Dorothy ran back inside the house to grab Toto, who was hiding under the bed. Suddenly, the house gave a great, violent shudder. Before Dorothy could reach the cellar, the wind lifted the entire farmhouse right off the ground. Higher and higher they went, spinning into the dark center of the giant cyclone. After a long time, the house landed with a soft thud. Dorothy opened the door and gasped. She wasn't in gray Kansas anymore. She stood in a beautiful land filled with bright blue flowers, sparkling streams, and trees heavy with delicious, colorful fruit. The sun shone brighter than she had ever seen. Out from behind the giant flowers stepped a tiny man wearing a tall, pointed hat and a coat covered in silver bells. His name was Pip, and he bowed low to Dorothy. "Welcome, noble sorceress. Pip said with a joyful smile. "You have set us free from the wicked witch of the east." Suddenly, a soft white light appeared, and a kind woman floated down to the ground. She was Borea, the good witch of the north. She smiled at Dorothy and explained that the farmhouse had accidentally landed right on top of the cruel witch who had ruled over the Munchkin people for many years. Borea pointed to the corner of the house. 2 feet wearing sparkling silver slippers were sticking out from under the wood. As they watched, the feet vanished into dust, leaving only the beautiful shoes behind. "These belong to you now," Borea said, picking them up. "They have a powerful and mysterious magic." Borea helped Dorothy put the silver slippers on her feet. They fit perfectly, as if they were made just for her. "I want to go home to Kansas," Dorothy whispered. "Can you help me find my way?" Borea shook her head gently. "I cannot, but the great wizard in the Emerald City can show you the way." Before Dorothy started her long journey, Borea leaned down and gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead. "This kiss will protect you from harm on your travels," she promised. "Follow the road paved with yellow bricks, and it will lead you straight to the great wizard." Dorothy picked up Toto and looked at the long, winding path of bright yellow stones stretching out ahead of her. She didn't know what adventures waited, but with her magic shoes and Toto by her side, she felt ready to face anything. "Come on, Toto," she said. "We're going to the Emerald City." Tinker Bell and the Dewdrop Dazzler. Deep inside the hollow of a great oak tree sat a cozy copper tea kettle. This was Tinker Bell's workshop. Outside, the sun was far too hot for a spring morning. The ground was dusty, and the beautiful lilies were still tightly closed in sleep. "If they don't wake up soon," Tinker Bell sighed, "there will be no spring festival at all." Tinker Bell was a tinker fairy, which meant she loved to fix things. She tapped her chin and looked at her drawing board. She needed a way to bring water to the thirsty flowers. "I'll build a machine," she declared. "The Dewdrop Dazzler will mist the entire meadow and wake the lilies with a gentle soak." Suddenly, the tea kettle door creaked open. In tumbled her best friends, Clank and Bobble. They were tall for fairies and always ready to help, even if they were a little bit clumsy. "We heard you needed a hand, Miss Bell," Clank shouted, accidentally knocking over a pile of thimbles. "I have the frame built," Tinker Bell said, pointing to a strange contraption made of twigs and acorns. "But the gears won't turn, and the sprayer is too stiff. I need some very special lost things to make it work." Bobble adjusted his goggles. "Don't you worry, Tink. We'll find exactly what you need." They searched through the piles of treasures that humans had lost in the woods. Tinker Bell found a long, shimmering silk ribbon caught on a briar patch. Nearby, Clank let out a whistle. He had found a shiny, curly clock spring tucked under a toadstool. "These are perfect," Tinker Bell cried. Back at the workshop, the fairies went to work. Tinker Bell used the clock spring to give the machine power. She asked Bobble to help her thread the silk ribbon through the tiny pulleys. It was delicate work, but Tinker Bell's hands were steady and fast. While Tinker Bell finished the wiring, Clank and Bobble polished the copper funnel until it shone like the sun. They high-fived each other, their wings fluttering with excitement. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Bobble whispered. The machine was finally ready for its big test. The 3 friends carried the Dewdrop Dazzler out to the center of the lily field. The sun was high, and the air was very dry. Tinker Bell and Bobble lifted the heavy machine onto a flat stone. "On the count of 3, Tinker Bell commanded. 1, 2, 3. Tinker Bell pulled a small lever. Whir, click, splat. At first, nothing happened. Then, the clock spring began to spin. A magical mist of cool, refreshing water began to spray from the copper funnel. Clank laughed as the tiny droplets landed on his nose. "It's working, Tink. It's working." As the mist touched the thirsty petals, the lilies began to stretch and yawn. One by one, they opened into giant, snowy white bells. The spring festival could begin. Tinkerbell and Bauble shared a happy dance in the air. The meadow was green and cool once more, all thanks to a few lost things and a lot of fairy teamwork. The Curious Visit of Elara. Deep in the emerald woods lived Elara, a girl with hair as bright as the morning sun. She was very curious, but curiosity without caution can often lead to trouble. One afternoon, Elara wandered further than she ever had before, following the scent of wild honey and pine. Soon, she stumbled upon a cozy cottage with a roof made of moss and walls of warm gray stone. No one was home for the three bears who lived there. Orson, Ursa, and Little Snuffle had gone for a walk while their midday meal cooled. Elara did not knock. She simply pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. On the kitchen table stood 3 bowls of porridge. Elara was very hungry. She tasted the porridge from the largest bowl, but it was far too hot. She tasted the porridge from the middle-sized bowl, but it was far too cold. Finally, she tasted the porridge from the smallest bowl. "This is just right," Elara whispered. She ate every last drop of the sweet, oaty porridge. She knew she should not eat what was not hers, but the hunger in her belly made her forget her manners. After eating, Elara felt tired. She saw 3 chairs by the hearth. The largest chair was too hard, and the middle-sized chair was too soft, but the smallest chair, belonging to Snuffle, felt perfect. However, as she settled in, the wood gave a loud crack, and the chair broke into pieces. Elara wandered upstairs to find a place to rest. She tried the largest bed, but the pillow was too high. She tried the middle-sized bed, but the mattress was too lumpy. Finally, she lay down in the smallest bed. It was so soft and warm that she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. While Elara slept, the 3 bears returned from their walk. Orson, the great big bear, and Ursa, the middle-sized bear, led the way into the kitchen. They were hungry and ready for their lunch, but they immediately noticed something was wrong. "Someone has been eating my porridge," growled Orson. "Someone has been eating my porridge too," said Ursa. Little Snuffle looked at his spot at the table and let out a sad whimper. "Someone has eaten my porridge and it's all gone." They moved into the sitting room. "Someone has been sitting in my chair." Orson huffed. "And someone has been sitting in mine," Ursa added. Then Snuffle cried out, "Someone has been sitting in my chair, and they have broken it to bits." The bears crept upstairs on their heavy paws. Ursa looked at her bed and saw the blankets were moved. "Someone has been sleeping in my bed," she whispered. Snuffle ran to his tiny bed and gasped. "Someone is sleeping in my bed," Snuffle squeaked. "And here she is." At the sound of the high-pitched voice, Elara's eyes snapped open. She saw 3 bears looking down at her, and she realized how wrong she had been to enter their home. Elara didn't stay to apologize. She scrambled out of the bed, leapt through the open window, and ran as fast as her legs could carry her. She never returned to the cottage in the woods, having finally learned that it is best to always ask before helping oneself to things that belong to others.